I've learned a new word as of late, and that word is, let me bring this up here, emolument. And even though as far as I know, have never been involved in any emolument, um, nor probably never will. It's a very interesting subject. It might say that one of our past presidents has been involved in this, and so hopefully, if you've watched any of our past episodes of Contemplating the Constitution, you've learned something. I have learned more from doing this show and entering into the discussions of the show and learning and asking questions than I have of several other things as of late. And so I'm really enjoying this broadcast, and I hope you are too. I am Mark David Smith, and you're watching Contemplating the Constitution.
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
That I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God.
I, Mark David Smith, do solemnly swear to uphold the Contemplating the Constitution broadcast. And on we go. Or as, let's see, Picard would say, engage.
I love Picard.
I'm watching the new Picard series and saw him do that last night. It was very good. So, cool. Hey, it's James and Abigail, my constitutional containment counterparts. That's what you guys are, is my containment counterparts. And so let's see, I'm trying to think of what was it that I don't even know what my name is today. It's Connie Constitution. So and we have Abigail and James. Oh, hear ye, oh, hear ye, oh, hear ye, be aware. That it should be, oh, hear ye, be aware, I think is so. How art thou, O hear ye's?
We're doing well. Everything's great. Beautiful day out here in the old land of Massachusetts, where most of it began. A lot of it began here from the Pilgrim. Mm-hmm. So
yeah,
it's doing well.
Yeah, one of the original 13. I hear. You know, I mean, I've read somewhere, and so what does the word Massachusetts mean? Do you know? Mr. We're trying to get James elected into the Senate, and
I don't know. But it's an Indian word. You know. So,
how interesting! I didn't know that.
Yeah, we have a lot of Indian names around here.
Okay.
We have a lake down the street called Lake Quannapowitt.
Uh-huh.
You know, so so there's a lot of Indian names from the originals, you know. Yeah,
we're in North Carolina, and there's a lot, you know, those types of things around here too. And we've noticed in the Outer Banks a lot of those things in the history of all that's is so interesting. And it's hey, one of those days where meshing all of this together and learning how things are going. Miss Abigail, wonderful prayer session you had this morning. She always comes in with such a big smile because her and God just spent some quality time together. And so,
without a doubt, oh my goodness, it is the best. I'm telling you, it is the best.
Mark, you made the right choice in putting prayer first, because it is just, I believe that there are so many blessings that are flowing from Messianic Lamb Network, and James and I say it all the time because of the War Room prayers. The other programs are definitely necessary, like this one here, but there's just something amazing about connecting with the creator of heaven and earth and having a conversation with him and thanking him and talking to him about what's going on in people's lives. And I get taken up. I don't know. I really, I have to remember that I'm sitting down in a chair. I'm not kidding. Something happens to me. It just really does. But, it's interesting that you asked about Massachusetts because, when I was a little girl and during this, most of the time they'd always ask us to draw a picture concerning the pilgrims. They always said in our classroom, I think it went up to about maybe 6th grade, they made us draw pictures of the pilgrims because we really hold that in high esteem around here, that it all began here. Cycles came forth here, and we're hoping it comes back. But I used to always love to draw the picture of an Indian. I always loved to draw the picture of the name of that Indian. He was
Squanto.
Squanto, and he was a good size Indian. He had a really nice physique and everything. And I just had such a great every time. I wish I could find that picture because my mother saved it for me. And it's amazing. There's so many. When you walk through, you have to come here sometime. You and Adina, Mark. We'll have to show you around because there's so many traces of the pilgrims as well as the Indian influence in this state. And we wanted to tell you something. We had that great conversation last week, and James and I went for a walk along the beach last week. And there's a boardwalk. It's Gloucester, the oldest seaport around. And you should have seen what the people in Gloucester did along that boardwalk, along with all the American flags that were facing the ocean. On the boardwalk, and we'll show it. We're going to bring it up at some point, and I'm not sure exactly when we're going to do it, but we're going to do it. They had these stones that were put on the boardwalk, and individual people wrote quotes from our forefathers and put them on the stones. Beautiful.
Oh, cool. Very cool.
So it was probably at least, I'm going to say, a mile worth of them. I don't know if
they were placed like every 6 feet. Get it? Every 6 feet.
Oh, yeah, I get it. Sure. They social distanced our forefathers. Okay, yeah, I get it.
But was more interesting. I mean, that was interesting, and we read every single one of them, and they were very inspiring, and
cool.
really took the time to decorate these beautiful stones. But what's interesting is that last Wednesday on The Hidden Voice of Hadassah, I talked about stumbling blocks because it says not to put, it says build up. Don't put stumbling blocks on my highway to me, to my people. And so here are all these encouraging, for the most part, there may have been one or two that were out there, but most of them were all quotes. And I said, we're going to show this on this broadcast because, people took time to encourage people about what was quoted by our forefathers.
Very cool. Very, very cool. I love it. How great. That's really interesting. I like that. It's I started off this whole series based on this book that I got in the mail with something. Somebody had ordered a video series for me. It sent it to me, and in the package came this little book called The Constitution of the United States. And the beginning of the book, the first 3 or 4 pages are just, all they are quotes from our forefathers about the Constitution, what they thought of the Constitution. And that's, if you go back and listen to the very first and second in this series, the Constitution series, I read a lot of those quotes, and John Craig was on and Sherry Flanagan was on, and we discussed those quotes and the people that were involved in all this. And so my little my little deal on go back and listen from the beginning. It's good. You don't have to just listen to each article we're doing. Go back to the beginning. It was very good and informative. So, James, the word emolument. Now, am I pronouncing that right, or are you familiar with it or not familiar with it? It is in Article 1, Section 6. By the way, It is Article 1, Section 6. Last week, we discussed Article 1, Section 5 and talked about, why the people in the House that we elect and senators don't show up for their show up to vote, and it makes me so mad. And I found out since then it makes a lot of other people mad too. So we talked about that and several other things, and but this week is that. So are you familiar with that word? Are you familiar with what it is?
Yeah. It's a.
Do you use it in a sentence every day? Is that?
I try. I'm not. I do at least 300 out of the 365 days.
Sure.
But
Sure,
I'm trying to ramp it up. Sometimes I do it twice in a day.
Sure.
Yeah. No, it's just a fancy word, from a Latin word, to gains, something that's given to you as a almost as a bribe, if you will, something. You heard that. Sure. Quid pro quo thing, during the
trial.
The trial, yeah. So I think this is what, when they keep on calling the emoluments clause, I think this is what they might be referring to.
I did some research on it, and we'll discuss that when we get to the second part of the Article 1, Section 6, Clause 2. And in my research that I'm doing, I'm finding a couple. I want to be sure and put the link to what I am using. And if you guys have something else that you want to let everybody know, to search out if they want to know more and search this out. There's a couple here that this shmoop.com. I have found that I even like even more than the Annenberg Classroom. Annenberg Classroom is really good. They spell out the text of the article, and then they give a meaning behind it, which is just kind of a general understanding of what you just read, more in today's terms than in the 1780s terms that they used in the Constitution. And Shmoop Shmoop, I think is what it is they're a little bit more informative on what they're saying. So I'm kind of, in my notes, I've kind of put the two together, and I like that. It helps me understand what they're doing. So as I'm talking about these today, I will be putting both of them together, both of their explanations together, the Annenberg Classroom and Shmoop. So there we go. Now, anything else you guys want to add? We've talked in past episodes about this is the Constitution, and it is our way of life in the United States. It should be what we pattern, legally, and what we do and how we work with each other and live together as people, understanding and abiding by the laws. But we also hold a greater Constitution, being the Torah, the laws of God, in higher esteem than our Constitution. And I would say Torah comes first, Constitution second. But they both can work together. I've actually been thinking lately too, in when I'm reading the Torah portion every week, is now that my mindset is into the Constitution and I'm searching things out about these different articles and sections and everything, is there something that I remember in the Torah that kind of goes along with this, and how does this work together? So be sure, if you guys think of anything while we're going through any of these that you think of within Torah, be sure to bring that up. And anyway, I love that. I think it's just quite awesome, even though we know that they didn't use the Torah to pattern the Constitution after. Still, the laws of God are all there. So, all right. Unless you guys have something to add, James.
I just have one quick factoid, or two factoids.
Sure.
We talked about Massachusetts, the meaning of Massachusetts. Well, I just looked it up just to see if I.
Did you go to the great and mighty Google?
Yeah.
That's what Adina says, is whenever we don't know anything, let's just go to the great and mighty Google.
Yeah, I did. I thought I might have went with the great and mighty Bing, but no, I went with the great and mighty Google. They compete a little bit, but Massachusetts is it's an Indian. Like I said, it was a Native American Indian name from the Massachusetts Bay Colony tribes that were here, and it refers to, it actually means about the Great Hill or at the Great Hill. And it's kind of sketchy in terms of if it's at or about, but about the Great Hill. And it just reminded me, I read a book years ago called The Politically Incorrect History of the United States. Loved it, and it gave a lot of different factoids on things, and because Massachusetts, especially the Boston area, is totally different than it was back in the colonial days. And when the French came over, they named this place, when they saw Massachusetts, saw Boston area, they called it Tres Montagnes, which was 3 mountains. And they it was literally, mountains here. But what we did is we basically tore down 2.5 of them, if you will. We leveled them, took all the dirt and all this rocks and whatever, and made landfill. If you ever heard of the Back Bay area, that's all landfill. That incorporates a lot of the universities and all that stuff. And then even if you can imagine Boston, it was like an hourglass. It was like fat, and then it went to a very thin land mass, and then went out to another fat land mass. And they filled all that in too. So the only thing we have left out of those 3 mountains is Beacon Hill, where the state capital is. But even that's probably lower than it was back when the French saw it. So I thought that was interesting. And did you know Carolina? What Carolina means in North Carolina? It's from a Latin word, but it's a Carolus, which is named after King Charles the First of England. Charles in that Latin is Carolus. Comes into Carolina. So
wow, not nearly as interesting as Massachusetts.
No, but I just thought that was kind of. I had if I'm going to give you a definition of Massachusetts, I want to give you.
I like it. It's cool. I was thinking back in my home, around my hometown, we have a Big Hill Lake, and it's right. Actually, it's a man-made lake. There was several hills. We don't have mountains in Kansas, but there was a huge valley around at the bottom of several different hills, and they stopped up a dam and created an actual lake there. And it's a lot of people live around there. But I was just thinking, had I known that Massachusetts meant Big Hill, then anything that we did around Big Hill, I could have just substituted big hill for Massachusetts and said, "So, are you going to go to Massachusetts today?" And people would have not had any idea what I was saying. Massachusetts, it's right outside Parsons, Kansas, down there. The Massachusetts Lake, you know.
And if you, I think you remember this, Mark, when we were at Sukkot in Oklahoma, and if you say Massachusetts really loud and kind of exaggerated, the comment after that is "God bless you."
Yeah, I wonder basically though is are we really pronouncing the Indian name or the word right? You know, a lot of these things, especially people coming from Britain over to the United States and meeting these Indians and hearing them say certain words, are we saying that word right? I won't even try to come up with a different way of pronouncing it than it could be, but wow, you know, you just never know. You just never know. We might be annihilating that, and Indians that know the actual word hear us say it and go, "What are you saying? What are you saying? That's not the word," you know. So, you just never know. You never know. All right, Article 1, Section 6. Here's the text in Clause 1. And I'm going to divide it up into clauses because there's actually 2 sections to a lot of these different articles and sections. And I've learned this from shmoop.com. They divide them up, and it helps me to understand, because a lot of times they're the same, but they have a couple of different meanings. So Article 1, Section 6, Clause 1, the first part: the senators and representatives shall receive a compensation for their services to be asserted by law and paid out of the Treasury of the United States. They shall, in all cases, except treason, felony, and breach of the peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session. Oh my gosh, I can't even believe this. This is, by the way, you're not going to believe this, but this is the United States calling. Yeah, and so I have no idea what this is, but I hope that I'll call me. Seriously, you know how you get it tells you who's calling. It says United States. Okay, I don't even know where I was, but let me go to the second part here. They shall, in all cases except treason, felony, and breach of peace, be privileged from arrest during their attendance at the session of their respective houses, and in going to and returning from the same. Can you guys hear me? I don't even have my. And for any speech or debate in either house, they shall not be questioned in any other place. Interesting. I find the wording once again here is our 20th century understanding of words that were written in the 1780s. They shall receive compensation for their services. In other words, they get paid, and to be ascertained by law. In other words, that's interesting that these people literally are paid based on a law put out, which is different and interesting to me. I find the expression breach of the peace to be an interesting little phrase there, and which is not used normally in, I mean, you have a lot of different breaches, but breach of the peace, in other words, I would say, you're causing things to be in chaos. And privileged from arrest, very interesting. Anyway, and according to Shmoop, it says here we have another odd mashup of 2 apparently unrelated points in one clause. First, congressmen get paid by the government at a salary they set for themselves. The 27th Amendment, proposed in 1789 and ratified 223 years later in 1992, put some restrictions on congressmen's ability to give themselves pay raises. Members of Congress are to be paid for their work from the U.S. Treasury. One of the things said, once again, 27th Amendment prohibits members from raising their salaries in the current session. So congressional votes on pay increases do not take effect until the next section of Congress. And as a matter of fact, I think James mentioned that last week or the week before. Greg Franklin was on and had mentioned something about them setting their own pay raises and things like that. So I went and took a look at the 27th Amendment, and the text reads, "No law varying the compensation for the services of the senators and representatives shall take effect until an election of representatives shall have intervened." And they give an understanding as the 27th Amendment bars members of Congress from voting to give themselves a pay raise. They may vote to raise congressional pay, but such increases can take effect only for the next session of Congress. The most interesting thing about the 27th Amendment is its history. The 27th Amendment was one of the original package of the 12 passed by the first Congress in 1789. 10 of those 12 gained ratification in 1791. We have known them ever since as the Bill of Rights, meaning the first 10 amendments. But this amendment waited in limbo for more than 200 years before finally gaining ratification from 3/4 of the states and becoming law. That is a record that surely will never be broken. Very, very interesting to me that through this time, though, they were able to set their salary. It's just they couldn't get it. I mean, it's they clarify as they go through here. Any comments on this?
Do you have a comment?
No, to me, when we see this happening, we constantly hear it, because we have the media letting us know that, they get their pay raises. And as you mentioned last week, they don't show up for work, but they get their pay raises.
Right.
And to me, what seems obnoxious about the whole thing is to me, if you're going to serve the people, you need to be in touch with the people. You need to have empathy. You need to, walk along the boardwalk, if you will, and see what's on the people's minds, and interact with people. And sadly, there's a very strong majority that are not even in touch with the people. They really don't understand what an average human being goes through, because they're living in their gated communities, and they're receiving these enormous pay raises. And I'm not against anybody, I'm not, it doesn't bother me if people have a lot of money. That doesn't bother me. It really doesn't. If you've earned your money, if you've worked hard for your money, and you've,
Right.
Baruch Hashem. But the reason I'm saying this is because of the state we're in right now. It's like, we talk about pay raises, and there's people who have been laid off of work. There's people that can't start their businesses up again. There's all these things that are going on in the people's lives that are living here in the United States of America, who these people are serving. And no one, there's some people that call it out, but few people ever call it like it is,
You're right.
So it goes back to this one word that I think is so valuable in our vocabulary: accountability. And when we have people who are sitting in that type of a position, and then they have the audacity to ask for these pay raises, when there's people that are truly, and I think wasn't there a pay raise? Was there one in that last request, that $3 trillion. Was that a pay raise too for them? I don't know if they got a pay raise then, but there were people that were asking for money that really didn't need the money. So here's my question. Here's my heartthrob. I honestly believe that our forefathers had more of a conscience for the people. I really believe when they wrote the Constitution, they were writing this with people in mind, and maybe their pay raises, they needed it for whatever they had to do. I don't know what their lifestyle was. It'd be interesting to see what kind of lifestyle they lived, but I know they're not living, they weren't living in gated apartments, gated complexes. So I just have an issue with that. I really have an issue. And even our president, who made a lot of money when he was, in the world, as a common person, if you will, he's not taking any kind of income from the United States of America.
Yeah.
Serving, and he doesn't need it.
Yeah, I know it. I know.
I just think just as a human being, if we really look at ourselves as human beings, would it make a difference in a man or a woman's heart concerning money? Does money make a difference in a person's heart? We got to be honest with ourselves, because
sure it does.
It changes people.
Sure
Lack of money changes people.
Sure
and more money changes people.
Right.
And let's just be honest. So if we're going to be people that are having more money, and yet we're serving Americans who have various levels of income, some have no income, I just think there's something wrong with that picture. There's something wrong with that. There's something that I believe needs to be changed. But the truth is, I never even hear them talk about the Constitution anymore. We're talking more about the Constitution than our leaders.
It's brought up. It is brought up. I see it here and there, not as much probably. But you said accountability. Another word is transparency. That is a real key word that I think that our elected government officials ought to be the most transparent people on their job and what they do. Now, I posted in the text a Wikipedia salaries of members of the United States of Congress, but in a quick reference here, I found that senators and House representatives make $174,000 a year. Resident commissioner from it says Puerto Rico. I don't know why it makes the same thing. President pro tempore of the Senate's 193,400. Majority leader and minority leader of the Senate's 193,400. So on and so forth. I don't know that I've made that much in my entire life. But yeah, I know I have. I have, but still, pay raise. I don't know. I say har because I think they're more pirates than they are sinners. So I don't know, but still. Anyway, so I look here.
Mark, just one more thing, because Sherry's in hallelujah. The challenge to me is this, and it comes from the Bible. My Constitution is the Bible, and I know we have the Constitution of the United States of America, but the plumb line is the Torah. And our Redeemer said this: you can't serve two masters. You can't serve Mammon and the creator of heaven and earth. You're going to love the one and hate the other. So if our Constitution is based on, life, liberty, I know that's the Bill of Rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. But to me, I believe that the forefathers had a constitution, if you will, of the Bible. I believe that the Bible was more at the fingertips of those people than it is and the people that are running the government today. I believe that they were more serious about it. But the bottom line is that you can't be a servant to people and to God if you're serving money. And when I hear this kind of conversation about money, 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 money. For them, I'm like, who are you serving? And that's a rhetorical question. That I know who they're serving. They're not serving the creator of heaven and earth.
Don't we have more important things to talk about and bring up than money? And all they want to do is talk about money. So I'm with you, 100%. I'm with you, Sherry. Let me undo you here. We were hearing an echo there. Hello, Sherry Flanagan. How art thou?
Hello. I ran over here to join y'all. I've been kind of listening as I'm running around getting ready for Bob and that captain coming for lunch. And
okay.
see, I'm not fully dressed. I don't have on my pearls.
Uh-huh.
There's an old Southern saying, a woman is never fully dressed unless she has on her pearls. So there you have it.
Maybe you need a pay raise. So we're gonna put into law that you get a pay raise.
Well, when you serve God, you may not have a lot of money. You have what you need, but the benefits are out of this world. That's
right.
Totally, yes.
Okay.
But you're talking about the pay raises that they have, and another thing in that, and we'll probably get in the emoluments clause a little later, but that's very interesting. It kind of ties into their pay. But when they first started serving in Congress, they were paid per diem or per day that they served. They were not given a year-long salary. If they went that day, they would get paid for that day. If they didn't go, they would get paid.
Wow. Let's reinstate that one. If you come and vote, you get paid.
That's right.
George agrees. Right there.
And
Wow.
and in the same clause that you mentioned that like you couldn't be arrested for anything if you were going to your meetings and stuff. We had a congressman when I lived in Tennessee, very well known. I'm not going to say his name. Very well known, from a very well known political family. And he acted like a nut because he was in Congress. He would drive like a maniac. They'd get him for drunken driving, but he was going up there to vote. So they couldn't charge him. It was the craziest thing, and it's because of this clause. He acted like a nut. He abused this particular clause in the Constitution. And, I'm going like, why do people keep voting that rascal in? Get rid of him. Don't vote for him. But I mean, he had a long record, but he was very savvy politically. He knew how to talk to the people, and he did do a lot. There were a lot of poor people in his district, and he really did get up there and fight for them and get them a lot of things. He was just a nut when he got behind the wheel.
Wow. It sounds to me like he knew how to manipulate the system also, which, I mean, most of them do. If they're politicians, most of them do.
Well, look at what Pelosi just did. She's voting so many. She can be there and vote everybody's vote for him.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm telling you, I would fight that to the Supreme Court. And if it didn't go, I'd make it a law of my state that if you're elected by us, you have to be in Congress so many days and you have to vote.
Yeah, I like
people. They're rascals up there. They think they're impermeable. What they used to call that mafia guy. They called him the Teflon Don. They think they're the Teflon Congress. People don't, Abigail, you mentioned accountability. People don't hold them to accountability.
That's right.
If we would quit being asleep and wake up and hold Congress to accountability. Congress wasn't all for Trump when he first went in. And he had to even fight some of the Republicans if you look back on it. But when they saw what a powerful constituency, the powerful people, how many jumped on board with him, they changed their tune. Wow. So Trump proved, just everybody was behind Trump was doing, and then they started getting behind what he was doing. So that it is the power of the people. But if the people don't rise up and exercise their power at the voting machine, then there you have it. And I understand people saying, well, it's two people, and I don't think either one of them are godly and everything. Well, I can understand that. But people, we're supposed to be electing leaders, not a preacher, and I've heard people just stand up and just really criticize, the politicians. Did you vote? Well, no, I don't believe in voting. Then you just need to be quiet.
Well, okay, so now I'm looking here. They're the representatives and senators that are in for 4 years, right? And 300, right? 4 years. And then every 2 years, a third of them change.
They stagger.
They stagger. That's right. So 365 days for 4 years. Yeah, 4 years is you're what?
It's 6 years.
6 years.
6 years for the senators.
Yeah.
And 4 years for representatives.
No, 2 years.
No. Yeah.
What?
Yeah,
I thought it was
6 years for the representatives, but maybe
No. It's 2 years for the Congress and 6 years for the senators.
Okay. I don't know. Why am I thinking the other way around? Okay, so 360.
Senator's office is 6 years. That's correct. I looked it up on Google. Google knows everything.
It wouldn't make any difference anyway. So 174,000 divided by 365, they make $476.71 a day. And so I don't, is that 174? I'm assuming the 174,000 is per year, not per the time they're in there.
Correct.
Per year. So that's 476 a day. I agree. I think we ought to put them on a daily thing. You come in and vote, you get paid $476. Well, I even give you a pay raise. I'll give you $480 a day, to if you'll just come and actually work. Anyway,
what do they get? 174,000 a year.
Let's see, I've got it here as senators and House representatives make 174,000 is their salary. So that means a year. They usually
$476 a day for every day they show up. If they don't show up, oh well, so sad, too bad. We might give them sick pay because that's a whole different ball game.
I don't know. All right, we can work something out.
If we give
more than most people make it in their life.
If we gave them
here, if you're making $10 an hour, that's $80 a day. Hello.
We'd be broke if you gave them sick pay though, because they're all sick.
Yeah, that's
you could make a case for that. Ooh. No, they're not all sick. There are some. There really are some up there. Some of the representatives are really fighting, and they have really been criticized for what they're doing. The swamp creatures have been after them too.
Oh yeah, no, you're right. You're right. When I said all, I was thinking of one party mainly, but
so would you pay? Would you accept that that type of pay there, Senator O'Hare? I mean, if you were elected into office, Senator O'Hare, would you accept that kind of pay? Just to get paid when you show up?
Yes, I would, and I would thank all my constituents.
You'd be very grateful of it.
Very, very gracious and very,
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
Joe just said $60 an hour for 8 hours a day, 356 days.
Yeah,
365. She transposed it. 365 days of the year. She corrected it.
Yeah, I get it.
Man, that's good. Woo.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We won't get done. It's amazing to me. It really is. When I originally read these sections ahead of time, it's like, what are we going to talk about? What this doesn't really have that much meat to it that we can hold a whole show on this. And then we get started and we're 3/4 of the way through the show and we barely got through the first clause, and it just amazes me what we really can bring up. All right. Article 1, Section 6 also protects legislators from arrest and civil lawsuits while they are in session. Sherry brought this up. Second, congressmen have legislative immunity. That is, they cannot be charged with a crime for anything they say in Congress, and they cannot be arrested or harassed by the police unless they have committed treason or other serious crimes. And I would like to talk about that. The idea here is to ensure that the president cannot abuse his powers by arresting or jailing legislators who disagree with him, but they may be arrested in criminal matters for the things they say, and the work they do as legislators, to prevent prosecutors and others from using the courts to intimidate a legislator also is why they can't, and to ensure the separation of powers among the legislative, judicial, and executive branches of government. And that also is part of Clause 2 is that you can't intermingle the three different branches. That's how we get our balance and understanding, and everybody can kind of regulate each other because it's all in-house, as we're finding. There's no outside sources that can look at any of this except the fourth legislative branch of the government, the media. They can. So anyway, anybody got anything more they want to add to that? I think it's interesting. Let's see. It's what was it? Three things cannot be arrested. No, they're committed treason or other serious crimes. That's awful general, if you ask me. And I don't mean that they should actually have to, put a list of what crimes, but and of course I know this is in the explanation also, but anyway, it would seem that it's hard to know what crimes they can be arrested for and what crimes they can't. So I don't know. All right. Going on, Clause 2, the second part of Article 1, Section 6, no senator or representative shall, during the time for which he was elected, be appointed to any civil office under the authority of the United States, which shall have been created, or the emoluments whereof shall have been, these things throw me off, have been created, or the emoluments whereof shall have been increased during such time, and no person holding any office under the United States shall be a member of either house during his continuance in office. The meaning is prohibits a senator or representative from holding any other federal office during his or her service in Congress. People serving in office in either executive or judicial branches of the United States government cannot also simultaneously serve in Congress and vice versa. The idea here is to ensure the separation of powers between the three branches of government. Furthermore, a member of Congress cannot resign from his seat in order to take another government job if that job had its salary increased during his term. That rule is designed to prevent corruption, making it impossible for a congressman to vote in favor of a pay raise for a certain executive office, then move into that office himself. So the rule is designed to prevent corruption, and that rule must be working because we have absolutely no corruption in the House of Representatives or the Senate. And so I'm sure glad that they put this in there because it's working well. So just a quick opinion of mine. All right. Unless anybody has something they want to add to this, I want to talk briefly here about emoluments. Yes, Sherry. Go.
You know, Chatty Cathy's always got something to say.
All right. It's why you're here. We like your input.
While they can't like there's no law, this protects them from what they say. You know, this is why whatever that woman's name, Omar, and some of those people up there making horrible anti-Semitic statements are getting away with it. But there is what they call censure. Now, that's in the Senate. I'm not quite sure off the top of my head if it's in the House of Representatives, which they are. But the Senate they can do what they call a censure, which is a public reprimand and disapproval of what's been said. And they can even do that with the president. But there's been only one president that was censured by the Senate, and that was Andrew Jackson. Of course, they didn't like him anyway. But that's the only one that was ever publicly censured. But they can censure their members. And another thing, too, if I'm remembering, didn't we go over part of the Constitution that they can actually refuse to seat someone? Like when all that brouhaha with Moore in Alabama, there was some talk that if he got elected, they could refuse to seat him. So
we haven't talked about that yet. No.
Yeah, I think that was one of the previous ones we had about their members. Section 2, I think we talked about the elections and stuff.
Okay.
And but I mean, they do have a way of censuring someone. Today, I'm not sure what big effect it had, but in previous times, it's been a big deal. I think they've censured 8 or 9 members of the Senate before, and it had an effect on them, especially with their constituents. But they can do that where they can't put them in jail. They do have that power of the trial and the press, or whatever you want to say it, you know, not the press, but the people. So, and they've been called for Omar and those others up there, wretched little people that they are, being anti-Semitic, that there's been some calls for them to be censured. And they haven't done it as far as I remember. I don't know if James and Abigail know or not, but
can I just say something? And then James says he's going to put the frosting on the cake.
No, no.
Okay, sure.
But I'm going to give a
I
little bit.
I already ate the frosting.
I'm going to give the cream in the middle of the cake. The problem is, and this has been going on, we're witnessing it right now. You know, they are not living. They are not. They're not holding up to what we're reading. They are not holding up to what is written here in the Constitution. I very seldom, I mean, we used to sit around our table and we'd hear all this, the Constitution. This was about, 12 years ago. We would say, the Constitution, that's going to uphold all this, when there was all kinds of things going on. You know, when Yeshua said lawlessness, I used to think it was just Torahlessness. But I believe the lawlessness it's also has to do with the law of the land, the Constitution. And people don't even recognize what they have the right to do. They're not holding anybody. We said earlier, the accountability. The people that are not all people. There are good people that are in the office, and I'm in agreement, Sherry. There's good people. We totally love some of the people that are trying to hold up justice, but there's a weak link. There's a weak link in how they are trying to, expose these. I'm going to say, someone mentioned the mafia or the mob, or the swamp, because they're not holding anything up. They're not even recognizing it as that's a problem. They're not recognizing the things that are taking place as a problem for the United States of America. They're blind. They are blind and deaf. And they're leading the blind and they're leading the deaf, and those are their constituents. And that's what we have to fight against. We, the people, as Sherry said, and it's so true. If we don't vote, if we don't exercise our right to vote, there's going to be a major challenge in this nation. We think it's major now. We ain't seen major. Since the Civil War, if you will. But but the bottom line is this: I am convinced they are blind and deaf. They are so lacking of any kind of a constitution in their own hearts. They're so self-centered, and they're so consumed with their own wants, as opposed to the needs of the people. So we really need to be voices of people that we have influence, and that's what we're doing here on this broadcast. We need to wake people up and say, things aren't going the way it is written in our Constitution or even in the Torah. And we need to wake people up and say, you have no idea what could happen if we the people don't vote and stand up for the Constitution and righteousness. I'm saying this is a catalyst. You know what a catalyst is? Right now, we are experiencing a catalyst into what's going to happen with America.
Right.
I'm concerned,
agree.
and that's why I'm expressing it like that.
I totally agree. I really do. I think what we're going to see in the next year is going to be life-changing for everybody. I really do. But we'll see. We'll wait and see how it goes. And there's never been a time in history when the people of the United States are going to need to stand up for our rights and the Constitution. So, Mr. O'Hare, Senator O'Hare, you have the mic. Yeah.
Present, and I will not vote president. I will vote for righteousness.
Very good.
But what Sherry was saying about both houses, the Congress and the Senate, do have the power to censure their members. The deal with Ilhan Omar of Minnesota, when she went on her little, I mean, she goes on it all the time, and she's in front of a Islamic group and saying some people did something, and then she talked about it's all about the Benjamins, talking about Israel and people are in the pocket, the Israel's in the pocket of the politicians, and all the different anti-Semitic comments that she has made, through her short year and a half long, and she's done a ton before that. I mean, there's a lot of ones that happened even before that. But what happened is partisanship is such a disgrace in this Congress, and and I think because I've read a lot of different things about the colonial days, and up through the things, and seen the political cartoons. They didn't have 24/7 news coverage, certainly, but they did have the newspapers, and they torched each other in the newspapers, and with the political cartoons and all that kind of stuff, and horrendous. So here you have a blatant anti-Semitic statements from this one congresswoman, and there's a swell of censuring her. They come up with a bill, and the bill not only mentions anti-Semitism, it mentions hate crimes, it mentions racism, it mentions like 15 different things, and it never mentions her name. And it was all about her, and so so they put this bill through, and they say, hey, look, we put a bill through, and censured these kind of comments, but yet the person that said these comments, they never mention. They water things down and water them down and water them down. I hope and pray the people of Minnesota in her district vote her out. Again, it's like the people are asleep. Tip O'Neill said all politics are local, so everyone hates government and hates the what's going on and all that kind of stuff and wants change, but yet they vote the same people in year after year after year.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm with you. I find it appalling, but unless the majority of the people, one person standing up and saying that is not going to do anything. It's got to be the majority of the people. It's just like the votes in the House and the Senate and Congress. It's the majority that has to be there. You got to have a quorum to stand up and do anything about anything, but. Very good. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate what you're saying.
One thing in light of what James just said,
Sure.
if I may, it has to
Sure.
do with the heart of the people. The heart of the people today are dishonest. They're liars and they're dishonest. They blatantly lie and they blatantly do not. I'm not saying all of them, but they blatantly, they're pathological liars. And unfortunately, we have a media that is supporting this. And this is where my concern is. And the people today in this generation, if you will, are visual people. They're not listeners. I mean, the Constitution, when that was written, there was no media. It was one-on-one conversations. They were listening to one another. They were listening to the people. Now we have the media, which has a major impact on the decisions people make. And we have a demonic force that is trying again to manipulate. They're manipulating the reasoning power. Let us reason together. They're just seducing them with lies. And if you don't do your due diligence like we are today, you're searching out the Constitution, searching out what's going on, you'll never find the truth. If you just listen to man and watch man, you are going to be deceived. So we're dealing with deception big time. And that's another concern because the media has the mob that's paying them and they're all doing what they're told to do. None of them are giving reports like a reporter should do. The facts. I'm reporting the facts. These are the facts, man, just the facts. No, what they're getting is my boss said, this is my talking point. And the reason he says it, say it again, say it again, say it again, because the sleepers and the blind and the deaf are going to hear it. And unfortunately, they're going to be duped. They're building their house on sand as opposed to the rock.
Good point. Very good point. All right. I'm going to end this up with, once again, what I started with, emoluments. And in looking this up, I found several different things on this, but Wikipedia kind of gives a little better understanding, I think. It's also called the ineligibility clause, sometimes also called the emoluments clause or the incompatibility clause. Is a provision in Article 1, Section 6, Clause 2 of the United States Constitution that makes each incumbent member of Congress ineligible to hold an office established by the federal government during their tenure in Congress. It also bars officials in the federal government's executive and judicial branches from simultaneously serving in either the U.S. House or Senate. We just talked about all this. The purpose of the clause is twofold. First, to protect the separation of powers philosophy upon the federal frame of government is built, and second, to prevent Congress from conspiring to create offices in or increase federal official salaries with the expectation of members of Congress would later be appointed to these points. Another part of this that I found is also called the Foreign Emoluments Clause. And this is a provision that we'll find when we get to Section 9, Clause 8, that prohibits the federal government from granting titles of nobility and restricts members of the federal government from receiving gifts and emoluments. Same thing as what we're talking about here. Often, emoluments being the pay or other financial compensation provided in exchange for employees' services performed. And so a foreign emoluments clause has to do with that of foreign governments foreign entities, foreign people, even in general, being able to influence and or pay for changes based on our United States government. And it brought to mind what our President Trump was, well, what's the word I'm looking for? He was, they said that he had something to do with Russia coming in and having influence or changing things in the election where Trump was elected the first time. And that, he had something to do with that and received pay for it and things like that, which since they have proved, but they've also now proved that through and I've got it up here. Let me put this in the text here real quick. If you want to go take a look at this, this is a very, very interesting read. It's called Senate Intel Releases Bipartisan Report on Obama Admin Response to Russian Election Interference. And you could read the first part of that. And this is from February 6th of this year, 2020. It's not but a couple of months ago. So let me just go down, like say the first part is just information. Second paragraph, today's installment of the third of 5 volumes in the committee's bipartisan investigation, blah, blah, blah. Okay, statement from Chairman Burr. After discovering the existence, if not the full scope, of Russia's election interference efforts in late 2016, the Obama administration struggled to determine the appropriate response. Frozen by paralysis of analysis, hamstrung by constraints both real and perceived, Obama officials debated courses of action without truly taking one. Many of their concerns were understandable, including the fear that warning the public of the election threat would only alarm the American people and accomplish Russia's goal of undermining faith in our democratic institutions. In navigating those valid concerns, however, Obama officials made decisions that limited their options, including preventing internal information sharing and siloing cyber and geopolitical threats. Thankfully, as we approach the 2020 presidential election, we are in a better position to identify foreign interference efforts and address vulnerabilities Russia and other hostile foreign actors may seek to exploit. We must continue building on the lessons of 2016, including making sure we have strong response options at the ready. I hope this committee's bipartisan report will help to further the public's understanding of the threats we face and the current administration's ability to respond to them. My point in all of this is that the different pays and the different compensations, as it's worded here, compensations for jobs done and things that happen in the background. We will find, of course, when we get to Section 9 of foreign involvement. But this right here to me today is present day understanding of things that happen behind the scenes, that if they can't deal with the person that really did it, they try to put it on somebody else that they already have something that they want to bring against. And that's what they did with Trump. So I know this doesn't involve exactly per se, but it's something that I found in my research that I thought I would bring out. That it kind of works with. They didn't have the ability to, like we do today in the digital world that we live in, where a country like even Britain could have come against the elections of the people back in the 1700s, in the late 1700s. They couldn't have done anything like this. But in present day elections, they can, it's open season for everything that we can do. So just something I wanted to bring up real briefly here. And once again, we'll talk about it even more when we get to section 9. Anything anybody wants to add to this?
Well, I can say one thing, that that whole issue with Obama and President Trump, unfortunately, they were manipulating what actually took place when it came to President Trump. They manipulated it and made it look like, there's nothing wrong with somebody talking to somebody from another country. There's nothing wrong with having dialogue with somebody from another country. But what they were trying to do was use that for against President Trump, saying that he was conspiring to manipulate the election and blah, 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 blah. That was one thing. They were spinning it, okay? They do that a lot now. They spin information. And again, if the public doesn't do their due diligence and think it through, what's wrong if somebody talks to a foreign diplomat? What's wrong with that? There should be nothing wrong with that. There's nothing other than conversation. But here's one that they caught actually on video with President Obama before he was elected the second time, reaching over and talking and saying, "I can't talk now, but after the election, I'll have more flexibility." So now that to me is fodder. That says something, that and the mic was on, and so there was a gotcha type thing. But the bottom line, everybody, and if we're not listening and if we're not getting it, when there's an agenda, and we all know when the enemy, which is the enemy, is in the United States of America, the enemy is not so much. There are enemies outside of the United States of America, but the enemy in United States of America trying to pull down United States of America is going to use the tactics. And you talked about it in the beginning, Mark, the money end of it. It says that money, when you give money, whether it be a salary or whether it be, something that is given to an individual.
Compensation.
It can blind a person. Money is like a bribe. Whether it's whether it's money you're being paid for, even on the job type thing or whatever, money can blind the human heart. Money can, again, because you become to love money more than you have a fear of God, and so the whole money end of it is what everything is being based on. Every tactic that they're making is called the power of the dollar. And the control, and so if people are really listening, they should hear what the threat is. The threat is whoever wants to live in Venezuela today. Does anybody want to live in Venezuela? And that used to be a very profitable country. Prosperous, very, very extremely. And now it's not. What happened? It was the love of money. It was wrong choices because of deception.
Socialism.
And socialism, that's the wrong choice. You go with socialism, and that's the wrong choice. Again, it goes back to the Constitution. If they follow the Constitution, you don't see socialism written in our forefathers' Constitution.
Sure.
I'm done.
No, it's good. Your point is very good, and it all falls here. But the compensation, which we know, the 27th Amendment says no law varying the compensation for the services. So there is varying compensation. It doesn't have to be money. All kinds of things of value. It's got to do with who places the value on what. So it doesn't necessarily mean, and there was nothing said in this article about Obama receiving any compensation for any of this, but even getting votes, more votes than what you were supposed to because they rigged everything, that's compensation for something. That is value. That is something that somebody is receiving for something else, and that boils down to the emoluments. And so that's why I'm saying, when I read all of this and prayed about it and thought about it, I thought, Lord, all this works together, and they're not to receive anything of value. It never mentions money, and I think that that's the real key to that word emolument, is that it's not necessarily money. It's compensation. It's something of value, and even votes, because the votes get you elected. That is a compensation of value to one of the parties. And if that person being elected is more apt to help a foreign country get things that they wouldn't necessarily get from the United States, now that foreign entity is being compensated with something of value. So it all works together. It works as one. That's why they're not allowed to receive these things, and no matter whether they're local or foreign or whatever the deal is. And once again, I'm really glad that they put that rule in to prevent corruption, so we no longer have corruption.
Well, that would be actually a pretty good argument, legal argument, I would think, for against.
Well, Senator O'Hare seems to have frozen up on us. Don't know what to say. Go ahead. You froze up on us. You just as soon as you started talking.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh,
so say it again, please.
I mean, it is a little cold here in Massachusetts. I think it's like 89 degrees, something like that. It's a little chilly.
Say it again.
I think that's a good legal argument, possibly. I'm not a lawyer, but I do play one on TV.
Love it.
But about the mail-in ballots, I mean, because who does that benefit? I mean, who? And you talk about value. Votes are valuable, and if they can get them any way that they want to get them, I mean, it's an interesting situation in California, in that congressional district where that woman had to resign because of some whatever with her staffers, inappropriate acts with her staffers, and so she had to step down. And then they had a special election just happened, I think 2 weeks ago, something like that. And the government of California specifically, put out many mail-in ballots, but yet the Republican was a man, and I think the Democrat was a woman that was going for this, and everything kept on showing that the Republican was winning. And at the last minute, they put a polling station out there so that they would hope that more Democrats would come out to do that.
Really?
Wow. And the Republican won.
Oh my God.
What happened was in 2018, 7 congressional Republicans were winning their election on election night. By like about 10 midnight, something like that, they were ahead, into the next day. And then over the period of 2 or 3 weeks, mysteriously, I'm not saying anything here, but just mysteriously, poof, all these ballots showed up, and it just kept on eroding the Republicans' lead until all 7 lost their races.
Wow. Amazing.
Is that something suspicious, or am I conspiracy theory 101.
It would be an interesting research to do on voting tampering and things like that. I think that would be a very interesting research and present what you can find, because I'm sure it's all out there. You can pretty much find anything on the great and mighty Google.
I mean, Yeshua did say that the fields are white for harvest. He didn't say the fields are white for harvesting ballots.
That's right. All right.
President Trump first came into office, remember he tried to get like a nationwide list of voters and who voted and all that. And they had states that absolutely refused to cooperate with the federal government. Huh. He really tried to put the damper on all this stuff. And I think if they really look close, I think they're going to find out there is a lot of voting fraud. And I'm going to tell you, if somebody is here and they are not a citizen, they're not allowed to vote. I don't care what anybody tells them. And if they do vote, it's against the law. And I think if they start investigating a lot of that, they're going to find out there's going to be a lot of people that would have been deported over that, because they're told that they can vote. But if you're not a citizen, you do not have the right to vote. And so were you through with the emoluments clause? Because I had one other thing.
Okay, yeah, go ahead and add to it all you want to. I just want to mention though that Ralph here in the chat says something about online voting, and there's a whole nother subject you can get into later. Once again, we're pretty much done. But Sherry, I want to hear what you have to say about emoluments.
Well, another part of the clause prevents, like if a member of Congress is in session and they vote in like a new office of XYZ, and that pay is going to be $200,000 a year. Okay. Whoever, a congressman who voted for that, cannot leave Congress early to be head of that department.
Right.
In other words, they cannot assume another office. And so that was to prevent corruption of, different people voting for something just to get another job, But they did find a way that they work around it. And it was done by, it's called the Saxby fix. It was put in by, I don't know if he was a senator or representative, but Saxby is his last name. Yeah. And they use that. When they know there is no corruption involved in it, when they, then it's like when Hillary Clinton, they had to use that to get around her eligibility for the office of the Secretary of State. And what they did, they had to go in, because she was if you remember, she was in the Senate, and what they did is they passed legislation to reduce the salary from the office of the Secretary of State to the level that it was before the increase. So she didn't get the increase in the salary. Otherwise, she would not have been eligible to be Secretary of State, which would have been just fine with me, but that's another story. But that's how they get around it.
Interesting.
The salary for the office to the level it was before the increase. Therefore, that senator or congressman is not gaining anything for having voted that in.
What you're talking about is manipulating the system, but I still don't understand. It doesn't, I don't know, why does the salary or amount of money have anything to do with anything? Because it doesn't say that in the Constitution. It says that they can't be appointed or take another office while in holding an office.
She was being appointed to the Secretary of State, and she had voted for a raise for
Okay.
the office of the Secretary of State. Therefore, if she took the office of the Secretary of State, she had gained a benefit because she voted for it. Does that make sense?
Kind of. I'm not so sure I really understand it, but I see what you're saying. It just, to me, it just sounds more like
her term was not complete. She was still in the
right.
Senate.
That's my point.
Yeah. So you can't leave the office early in order to take a position that you're going to benefit by that you voted for. It's weird. It really is. But that's how they get around it, is what they call the Saxby fix. They just lowered put it back to the way it was for her.
Well, if it had to do with a Clinton, you can pretty much never mind. So just put a dot on that.
I think Pelosi is getting right on up there. I just tell you what, something else now.
Yeah. Okay, we're
God raises up kings and he pulls down kings, and God's people are praying that he put those in office that he can use and will use, but it's up to him.
Amen.
And will raise up people, wake people up in the United States to get out and vote. And if they don't like who's on the roster, run yourself. That's another.
Pray us out of here, Sherry. We gotta go. Sherry,
I didn't know what you said. Yes.
Pray us out of here. We need Susan's here. We gotta go.
Okay. Well, Father, we just give you glory and honor and blessing and power, because you are the ruler of the universe. You do raise up kings and you do put down kings, and blessed be your holy name. In Yeshua's mighty name. Amen.
Amen.
Shalom, shalom.
Love you all.
Until next week. Thank you guys very much for joining me in all this. I really appreciate it. All right, have a great week.
Thank you.
We'll see you next week.
Amen.
We are richly blessed to bring you what we believe is the fullest, most diverse, yet up-to-date progressive teachings, discussion, and prayer programming you can find anywhere on this planet. Be sure to take the tour of the MessianicLambRadio.com website. I'm Susan Hoogie, thanking you for joining us on the Messianic Lamb Video Network.
I, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, do solemnly swear.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear.
I, Barack Hussein Obama, do solemnly swear.
I will faithfully execute the office of President of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States.
The Constitution of the United States. So help me God.